Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the CCRC Keio University and the SIPA Columbia University dialogue on cyber issues, cyber matters. So the CCRC and the Keio University and the Columbia University have been coordinating several programs together, and they're working together for the researches regarding the cyber issues in many aspects. Dialogue between the two entities, two universities is one of them, and especially we are pretty international group and then international activities, but then specifically focusing on the dialogues between U.S. and Japan. This morning, I mean this time, we're going to be focusing on the 5G technology and its deployment, and also the 5G and the beyond, which might be called the 6G. So let me briefly starting the discussions agenda about the 5G thing. So 5G originally started, of course, as a kind of a new technology for the mobile infrastructure. Okay, so after 4G or LTE technology. The term actually defined by 3GPP, but it turned out to be and started as a kind of a buzzword for the new internet infrastructure with the mobility. So that's also another aspect of the 5G as well. The second point, a very important point, is that 5G was deployed by very strong entities around the world, but especially from the Chinese industries. Chinese industries have been, kind of strongly moving toward the 5G from the first point, especially on their deployment and their new development area of utilizing the personal data, tracking them, and turned out to be a kind of a new AI services. So that was not only inside the China, but also the deploying to the various countries around the world in a very rapid way. So also the developments were done by the various countries, including the EU, US, and Japan. But the speed of the deployment and also the development was so strong because of their internal market toward the 5G, including the personal services and the AI based, the digital data based thing. So that turned out to be the pretty much kind of national trading issues as well. Also, kind of extending toward the national security type of issues, because the internet and the cyberspace infrastructure is now turned out to be the basic infrastructure for any industries, economics, health, education, and other things. So it's getting very important lifeline. And then the 5G name turned out to be used sometimes for the kind of lifeline system infrastructure. Who's going to be taking the lead type of a discussion. So now this time the dialogue between the US and Japan, but it's very much 5G, and it's kind of more toward the security issues in a broader sense. And also because of this is a kind of technology architecture for the kind of surface of connecting people for the internet and the cyberspace. Therefore, it turned out to be more to the international standard issue, and how the nation states going to be working for the after the 5G as well. So which is sometimes called the beyond 5G in Japan, but also in a kind of more toward the simple word 6G. So this time we invited the two experts from the US side and the Japanese side. So the structure of this morning dialogue is going to be starting with Danielle Kriz from the United States, from Palo Alto Networks, obviously the super experts organization for the cybersecurity and the internet security area. And also the from Japan, and we have asked Rika Tsunoda-san from the digital agency, newly created agency, our government of Japan, but she's been working as a MIC, the Ministry of Telecommunication area, for the this type of new advanced technology as well. So we're going to start both of the presenters for the short presentation first, and then turned out to be discussed. So the questions going to be on various formats, I believe, and then it could be taken by the Cherry or the maybe I can take that. I can see you. So why don't we start with starting from the presentation from Danielle from the US side. Thank you.
And if I can, as a point of order, my apologies. Hi, it's Jason from Columbia. I wanted to just note we had a US government colleague join us, Brian Peretti from Treasury. He's new to the group, and I just wanted to take the opportunity. My apologies for interrupting, and I don't know if maybe we can have Brian introduce himself now or later.
Okay, thank you, Jason. That's nice, and welcome for the attendees. So now it's Danielle, please.
Great. Well, thank you. And I see a lot of people I know on the screen, which is wonderful. I'll share my screen in a minute, but I'm Danielle, Kriz. Yeah, Jay and Michael and Brian, you and I worked together maybe 10 years ago on some financial services, cybersecurity work, I think, and Chris and others. So really excited to be here. I actually, Japan is very near and dear to my heart. I lived in Tokyo between undergraduate and graduate school for 2.5 years, many years ago, too many to count. And I've been very lucky in that I've been working with the Japanese government on cybersecurity for almost 20 years. My career started in the US government doing technology policy and trade policy at the US Department of Commerce, and was lucky enough to be working with Japan on cybersecurity issues when NISC got stood up back in 2005. So knew Yamaguchi sensei and the group that were leading that work, and Japan has taken such a leadership role in the last 15 years on cybersecurity, both domestically and internationally. So really appreciate that. So with that, let me share my screen. All right, let me do the getting into slideshow view. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, is it the slideshow view for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So again, thank you very much for having me. I've been with Palo Alto Networks now for about 6 years. And my career has been both US government, some consulting work, a trade association, and now a company. And I've been working on cybersecurity for about 18 or 19 years, and really love it. And again, really appreciate the opportunity to work with Japan. In my work at Palo Alto Networks, I do our global international policy work, so engaging with governments outside the United States. Japan is one I talk to quite a bit about cybersecurity and what are effective approaches to cybersecurity, and how can we as a leading cybersecurity company, thank you very much, Murai sensei, but how can we be helpful? How can we contribute both our expertise at a policy level as well as the technical level? So really appreciate this. So my main point, and this is something I've been working on in our company with our 5G technical experts for more than 3 years now, almost 4, is trying to bring out the message, and I will keep this to less than 10 minutes, just, you know, when I sensei, I'll go quickly through my slides, but governments in the last few years have very much focused on supply chain security for 5G, as well as particular vendors in the network, which is very important, and supply chain security is very important. But the reality is that the threats to 5G networks, to the users, to the services that run over 5G, and the requirements to secure that are much, much broader than supply chain or the vendor in the network. And I'll explain why in a minute. And so the policy responses must be broader. So taking a step back, and why is that, which I'll discuss, but you know, Murai Sensei talked about this, like 5G is transformative. It's a basic infrastructure for every industry. It's going to be transforming governments, businesses, economies. There's so much at stake. And if you look at the security that was appropriate for 3G and 4G, which arguably was largely used by consumers, you know, they would care if their phone got bricked and they'd take it to the store and get it unbricked. You know, that is not sufficient when you have government data, business data, personal information, business secrets, and just, like you said, life and death situations with hospitals leveraging these networks. So 5G as well as 6G, the networks have to be built with security that's appropriate for businesses and governments, which is enterprise grade security. So our recommendation is that the US and government it's important to focus on supply chain security and vendor concerns, but that's only a piece of the puzzle, and they've got to be promoting that operators and operators invest in and users demand enterprise grade security. So I'll walk through that. So, you know, the main reason for this is the sophistication and breadth of cyber attacks in 5G as well as IoT. So, you know, we all know that cryptocurrency and mining of it has been a huge issue, and that's going to only increase. Cryptocurrency can leverage IoT devices. We have malware variants on the rise. A lot of this is from our own company's research. $9.9 billion of malware attacks were in 2019, and then the cost of cyber attacks is rising. And I'm not going to go into all of these technical details. I wanted more to just have a visual here, but you have a wide array of threats. You have vulnerabilities, brute force, antivirus, command and control, and others. And all of these need to be protected for 5G networks. So if you look at all of these, this is not related just to the vendor in the network. This is related to how what communication is running over the network, how the network's being protected, with the cloud that's being leveraged to deliver the communication services. So this is quite a lot of threats and attacks. And same thing here. I'm not at all going to walk through the technical aspects of this slide, but it's one that our technical team will use, where it shows, all the threats that are between the devices and the core and the MEC and the RAN. There are threats throughout the whole 5G network. And so again, you can't just address these by focusing on a particular vendor. So again, because of this, because 5G is going to drive the future of industry and really power critical infrastructure, there's a huge opportunity to transform industries with 5G. And so enterprise grade security means you have to have security again on all the layers. So on the data layer, the signaling layer, the applications layer of security, there's been a huge focus traditionally on signaling layer security, which is how secure is that connection, the communication between or in the network, which is great, but the data layer is where the content is, and that's where the threats go through. So that's where the command and control and the malware, that is in the data layer. So you need to have visibility to secure that, secure all the locations. So whether it's the RAN, the data center, Open RAN, every single location needs to be secure. Securing against all attack vectors, as I mentioned, there's a lot of them. And then particularly as 5G is being containerized and is very software heavy and cloud heavy, it has to be secure at all life cycle of software development. So that is important as well. So again, this kind of breaking it down in a different way, it's securing all layers and compute resources, but also in an automated way. So the threats, as you all know today, are automated, very sophisticated. you've got to have technology that can automate detection and automate response to stop threats, again, across all these layers and attack surfaces. And it needs to be based on a zero trust approach, which you can do using technology that's out there today. If you're saying, well, I only trust that piece of equipment to beacon to the operations center, but hey, it's beaconing to some military in another country, it's not supposed to do that. You don't allow that to happen, but you can do that with technology. I know Open RAN has been a very big focus of both the US government and the Japanese government, and we don't make RAN technology, so we secure any kind of RAN, whether open or traditional, but the Open RAN Policy Coalition came out with a paper in April that echoed a lot of these sentiments, that you need to secure all the interfaces and APIs, attack surfaces in an automated manner, and that you need to be leveraging machine learning to analyze telemetry. So, they're saying, in a sense, Open RAN needs to have enterprise grade security as well. We provided input into, we're a member of GSMA, I think an association a lot of you know, and they came out with a reference document about 2 years ago that focuses on data plane security. And so one of our engineers, Leonard Barakovsky, was very involved in that and wrote a blog. So he worked with a lot of telcos to develop this guidance about how operators can secure the data plane. Whoops, did not mean to build this way. You can tell I'm not a PowerPoint expert. The recommendations are, again, vendor supply chain security is very important, but it doesn't approach the whole picture of what are the risks that we need to manage for, and that operators need to manage those risks and secure the data and their customers regardless of the underlying technology or vendor. We think, and I think the US and Japan could really do a great service globally, as a lot of countries are rolling out 5G to promote this approach and expectation both within our own countries, but also in the international forums that we're part of. So I'll just end up by saying we've written a couple of white papers on this, translated some of our blogs into Japanese. I'd be happy to share those links. And again, these papers more fully explain our thinking there. So that's it. So hopefully that's interesting and helpful. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. It's already a lot of very interesting points that especially on how that deployment and the issues in the US seems to be you mentioned the enterprise grade security. Therefore, it's also the kind of this expecting impact of the 5G in the US. I believe it's going to be a little bit different in each of the nation states' basic infrastructure for the broadband internet infrastructure issues. And also, as an expert about cybersecurity, then you mentioned about all the very important cybersecurity issue, and especially as enterprise grade security. And also, finally, you mentioned about the role of the government and the private sectors and the technology. So these are the great discussion point later for this dialogue. So let me ask Rika Tsunoda-san to start her part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you for having me, and I'm so very excited to be here, and nice to meet you for most of all, and good evening and good morning and good afternoon whenever you are. And I just co-wrote my article about the 5G and 6G Japan-US policy coordination at Rand Corporation as part of my studies at Harvard Kennedy School, where I specialized in national security policy. And I believe the 5G and 6G policy is critical for both US and Japan. So I'm really excited to be here and discuss with you all. So first, let me share my slide. And I hope everyone can see my slide, okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And okay, so once again, thank you for having me. And so what I'm planning today is to share an overview of Japan's 5G and 6G strategy and the US-Japan's policy coordination in this area. And I believe that 5G and 6G is critical to both countries' national security. And although today I'll be talking about Japanese government 5G and 6G policy, and please note I'm here as an individual and I'm not representing the Japanese government in this session. And first, at my main argument, this is what steps Japan believes is needed to produce reliable 5G networks. And Japanese government is not only trying to remove untrusted ICT vendors, but also change the oligopolistic 5G market structure by investing reliable 5G technologies and to restructure the 5G market by promoting open RAN and intellectual property and standardization for 5G and beyond 5G. And do you see my, okay, this is my next, okay. And for start, let me begin with sharing the current 5G situations and market situations and how Japan and the US see the challenges to build reliable 5G networks. And this pie chart shows global mobile base station market share in 2021. And currently, as you can see, Chinese, European, and Korean firms have taken up 90% share of global mobile base station market. And Chinese vendor adopts vendor lock-in model by deploying proprietary hardware equipment. And vendor lock-in model has security challenges, I believe. First challenge is that proprietary hardware makes 5G networks black box, so mobile operators are not sure what network systems a vendor implants in their 5G networks. And the second challenge is that proprietary hardware makes it hard for multiple vendors to join 5G network business. And the third challenge is a supply chain risk. And when one vendor proprietary equipment dominates a company's 5G networks, the company will rely on their vendor to import equipment and upgrade the network. And next, we are going to look at the 5G standardization race. And Japanese ICT firms in total hold 15% 5G standards essential patents. And NTT Docomo, which is the Japanese largest telecommunication company, holds most of them. So this means development of standards essential patents in Japan is not quite competitive right now. And that bar chart in the right shows Huawei has ranked top in 5G standardization proposals for 3GPP, an international standards development organization, which sets specification for 5G technology. And the percentage of FEPs owned by Japanese ICT firms has been declining. And if the situation continues, Japan would fall behind the other ICT firms in 6G development competition. And this chart shows beyond 5G R&D capabilities of major countries, including Japan. And deep blue box shows technology fields where a country takes a lead in 6G element technologies competition. And Japan has advantages in all photonic network and quantum cryptography and network virtualization. And take network virtualization as an example, Japanese mobile carriers like Rakuten and Docomo have already implemented virtual radio access network in commercial networks. So let's move on to the Japanese government's 6G strategy overall. In Japan, Japanese Prime Minister and National Basic Science and Technology Plan have set the tone for developing next generation infrastructure technologies, including 5G and 6G, and establishing resilient supply chain. And Japanese government published the Beyond 5G Promotion Strategy in June 2020, which shows basic policy to develop 6G. And there are 3 pillars in the strategy. First pillar is R&D, which means a Japanese government gives financial support for beyond 5G R&D. And second pillar is standardization, which is the Japanese government promotes open architecture and default standards to create more opportunities for ICT companies to enter 5G and beyond the 5G market. And third pillar is 5G network deployment, which is the Japanese government promotes deploying 5G network nationwide to create an environment for beyond 5G or 6G networks. And this is a timeline of beyond 5G promotion strategy. The Japanese government aims to put 6G technologies in practical use by 2030. To achieve that goal, the Japanese government has put intensive effort in 6G component technology by 2025 at a phase 1. And beyond the 5G strategy recommended specified areas, the areas that Japan should focus on 5G and 6G R&D. And promoting Japanese ICT firm 6G development in these areas helps decreasing dependence of supply chains on foreign companies and bolstering international competitiveness and national security. And Japanese government created funding scheme for R&D for 6G. And in December 2020, Japanese government allocated $485 million for funding R&D for 6G. And the fund has been used to develop 6G component technologies. And Japanese government is also going to use budget for building testbed facilities for companies to develop these technologies. And Japanese NICT, National Institute of ICT, has open source for 6G R&D project proposals. And there are 3 types of R&D programs right now. Since I'm allowed about only 10 minutes today, so I'll skip the details, but more than 40 projects have been adopted so far. And Japanese government aims to boost public-private cooperation for developing 6G. And in December 2020, the Japanese government established Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium. And this organization promotes collaboration among industry, academia, and government to share their R&D and standardization efforts. And in the Beyond 5G promotion strategy, the Japanese government aims to propose 6G technical requirements for international standards. And since it's effective to enhance Japan's international presence, Japan has nominated Mr. Onoue as a candidate for the next director of ITUT. And lastly, I'd like to briefly share the US-Japan's 5G and 6G policy coordination. Japan and the US governments realize the importance of policy coordination in 5G and 6G area. And policy cooperation is underway globally in bilateral and multilateral. For example, in the 3rd Prague 5G security conference last year, the US has taken an initiative to bolster 5G supply chain, and Japan got involved in making a telecommunication supplier diversity proposals. The proposal has 9 actions for companies to promote supplier diversity and open and interoperable networks. And I believe US and Japan will promote other countries to endorse the proposal. And lastly, 5G remains critical issues for both Biden and Kishida administration. And I'd like to keep close watch on these international trends. And so I'll stop here and thank you for listening. And I'm looking forward to your insights and questions.